Sometimes a video topic is so fun to talk about that you've gotta run it back one more time. We've talked about fighting game moves in non-fighting games in a video last year, but that really only scratched the surface of these occurrences in video gaming. Whether the devs themselves were fans of the video games they're referencing, or a dev team is just including a cheeky little nod to a fighting game series under their umbrella, it's always a fun time seeing the genre referenced in places you might not expect. As with the last video, we're going to be keeping these examples to instances where the character doing the move in the non-fighting game is different from the character known for doing the move in the first place. So, as fun as the Marvel vs. Capcom references in Marvel Cosmic Invasion are, and they are really cool, they won't be appearing in this video. That said, before we get fully started, we'll actually start off by doubling back to some of the games mentioned in the previous video to cover some examples I may have overlooked the first time through. So, grab a snack and get comfortable. But not too comfortable or you might fall asleep. But hey, if it's comfortable sleep you're looking for, then this is a great time to talk about this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Being that I write, capture footage, record voiceover, and edit every video on this channel by myself while also having a day job, that often leads to a lot of late nights burning the midnight oil, some of which have actually been a little sleepless. And as someone that's been trying to be a little better about my sleep hygiene, Manta Sleep's sleep masks have been instrumental in helping me to get a good night's sleep after staring at a computer monitor all night long. Manta Sleep masks provide 100% blackout from any light sources and eye cups adjustable to your liking, ensuring peaceful, undisturbed sleep. Best of all, there's different masks for different kinds of sleepers out there as well. If you're a side sleeper like me, Manta Sleep's silk mask will be right up your alley thanks to its tapered eye cups and the foam in the eye cups molding to the shape of your face. And don't worry, all masks are adjustable and easy to put on. If you happen to be binging my videos, which are definitely on the longer side, you're probably going to be ready to nap or hit the hay after watching several, so why not make sure you get some restful sleep on top of that? Be sure to click the link in the description or use the code 7FORCE at checkout on the Manta Sleep site for 10% off. Shoutouts again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video and providing me with some of their masks to try out. Alright, so stepping back a bit, we talked a good deal last time about all of the fighting game moves referenced throughout the Mega Man X games, including the Shoryuken, which was famously included as a secret unlockable ability in Mega Man X2. What I also neglected to mention is that X also has this ability in Mega Man X8 as well, usable when he's in the Ultimate Armor. Scott Pilgrim is another game chock full of fighting game references that we covered already, but there's a few notable inclusions I originally neglected to mention. For example, Kim's dash attack is a little butt bop that pushes her forward, likely a nod to Yuri Sakazaki's signature Onyoku command normal in SNK fighters. Stephen's special move also seems like a pretty obvious nod to Terry Bogart's Power Geyser, though the energy is localized around him instead of in front of him. Ramona's first unlockable unique move is also a shout out to Kim Kafwan's Hengetsu-zan seen in multiple Fatal Fury and King of Fighters games as well. When fighting Negascott, the boss of the game's 6th stage, one of the attacks he'll do is just straight up a Hadouken, fired the way you'd expect in everything. When you unlock him as a character, this is also an unlockable move for him as well. One that's a little easy to miss considering he himself is referencing a ton of video game bosses simultaneously can be found during the boss fight against Gideon's first form. Look very closely at the overhead kick attack he'll occasionally do. It's a shout out to another video game boss. Specifically, it's Gil's standing heavy kick from the Street Fighter 3 games. Keeping the tribute games examples rolling, there's one big omission in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge that I'm not even sure how I managed to forget, but one of the most obvious fighting game shoutouts in the game comes from Raphael's anti-air move, which is a very overt shoutout to another fighting game anti-air, Soul Bad Guy's Volcanic Viper and Guilty Gear. I also previously mentioned a lot of the SNK references in some of the moves in that game, like Leo having animation shouting out Jubei from Samurai Showdown, and Donatello riffing off of Billy Kahn's moves. But perhaps the most concentrated SNK send-up comes in the form of one of the game's DLC characters. Included with the first round of DLC for the game, Usagi Yojimbo is a pure swordsman, and fittingly, a lot of his idol and combat animations reference various SNK swordsmen and swordswomen. For example, though this isn't a fighting game move itself, the EI Jutsu stance he takes in his idol animation seems very specifically designed after fellow practitioner Hibiki from The Last Blade 2. His charged melee move, a large crescent-shaped slash, also calls to mind another Last Blade character, specifically Moriya's Ito Shingetsu special move. Both his grounded and aerial special move, when seen separately, don't seem all that interesting, but when you put them together, they form the basis of Tenha Dankuretsuzan, Haomaru's weapon flip technique from Samurai Showdown 3 through 6. I also mentioned Castlevania Order of Ecclesia and how Shinoa channels her inner Geese Howard with one of her glyphs, but secondary character Albus has a fighting game reference of his own in both his boss fight and in his unlockable playable appearance. His quadruple Ignis special move is a dead ringer for a certain Street Fighter move, the Shien Kyaku, better known as one of Fei Long's signature attacks. I think that wraps up just about all of the additions from the last video that I wanted to talk about, but since we're already at it, let's keep things going with some more Castlevania. If you haven't already noticed from how much music from the series I use on this channel, I'm a pretty big Castlevania fan, and as basic as an opinion as it probably is, Symphony of the Night is not only my favorite entry, but my second favorite video game of all time. And a part of that comes down to it being a game so densely packed with little incidental details that are so incredibly easy to miss considering just how many of them there are. One of Symphony of the Night's coolest features is its input-dependent special moves, some baked directly into Alucard's moveset like Dark Metamorphosis, and some being specific to certain weapons. One of the game's most infamous weapons is the Crissaegrim, a super rare, super powerful weapon with an incredibly low drop rate that can be obtained in the Forbidden Library in the second half of the game. However, there's another weapon drop in the same area that's easy to overlook. In some rooms in this area, you'll come across the lion enemy, who really isn't too difficult to dispatch, and since one of the best rooms to farm for the Crissaegrim also has lions in there, you may as well kill a few of them too. Do so, and you might be blessed with their rare item drop, the Fist of Tulkas. This is one of many fist weapons in the game, but this one has a neat little trick to it. If you do a quarter circle forward motion and press attack, Alucard will punch, but will also send out a fireball, fitting for a move using the iconic Hadouken motion. There's a second move too, however. If you press back, forward, and attack, Alucard will do a stationary flurry of punches. Though the Symphony of the Night move omits the first forward input, this is undoubtedly a shout out to Ryo Sakazaki's Zanretsuken in Art of Fighting. Who knows, maybe another game on this list might actually get the full input right. Fast forward to 2006 and you have the release of another of my favorite entries in the series, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin for the Nintendo DS. The main character, Jonathan Morris, the son of the protagonist of Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis, can use a few special abilities, from martial art actions like evasive flips to standard traversal-based special moves. One such special move is a repeatable high jump, a tradition in the more search action-oriented entries. Jonathan is able to do so in Portrait of Ruin thanks to an item called the Griffin Wing, but Jonathan's high jump, while being an uppercut similar to characters before him, most notably Richter Belmont, is a little unique. Jonathan doesn't just do an uppercut when performing this maneuver, but he does a flaming uppercut, not unlike a certain red-clad blonde fighting game character. Now that I'm thinking about it, how the hell did Jonathan not get into Castlevania Judgment? Well. Die Hard Arcade, or Dynamite Deca as it's known in Japan, is one of the best beat-em-ups of the 32-bit era. Developed for the Sega Saturn-based Sega Titan V arcade board, Die Hard Arcade is the end result of Sega having a bunch of those aforementioned arcade boards going unused and the license to make Die Hard games, which had also gone unused by them. The end result is a 3D beat-em-up with a massive move list, texture-mapped graphics, the first of its kind for the genre, and even QTE events between stage segments to mix things up. I'm not kidding though, the move list is absolutely massive, and wouldn't you know it, there's some fighting game references snuck into protagonist Bruno Dellinger's moveset. You'd think that these would be Virtua Fighter shoutouts because Sega and all, but no, he actually has a handful of Street Fighter nods instead. Pressing punch and the jump button simultaneously has Bruno doing a leaping uppercut, not unlike the Shoryuken. Much more telling is the attack you get for holding down kick, then letting go. It's straight up Gaio's flash kick. The fact that you have to specifically charge this move lends credence to it being an intentional Gaio reference, I feel. Bruno's emergency retaliation attack for when he gets grabbed also looks like the Tatsu, but looking at it closer, it looks a lot more similar to Guy's Mega Crash attack in the first final fight, which is probably the more sensible reference given the two games share a genre. Not from a fighting game, but I thought I'd mention it. Die Hard Arcade is kinda tricky to play these days outside of emulation unfortunately, but if you still have a PS3 kicking around, you can still pick up the Japanese PS2 remaster of the game off of the Japan PSN store. It plays the same and even has a toggle to enable the original arcade and Saturn graphics. Despite being a big fan of the franchise, Final Fantasy is a series I haven't gotten to talk about too much aside from when I mentioned Air Guys or Dissidia, though I suppose that'll be changing soon thanks to Street Fighter VI. Final Fantasy VI is one of the most beloved entries in the series, and for good reason. Its expansive cast, a plot spanning 2 general world states, and a soundtrack that to this day, I still can't believe Uematsu pulled off on the Super Nintendo, make it an easy all-timer and one of the 16-bit era's best. If you look at some of the staff interviews from around the game's 1994 release, you can see the staff also listing their favorite video games at that moment of time in their bios, and a few of them are definitely fighting game fans. The character designer for Edgar and Sabin, for example, lists Fatal Fury as her then favorite game, and has even stated that she loosely based the dynamic of the Final Fantasy VI siblings off of Terry and Andy Bogard in Fatal Fury, likely using the OVA depictions as a basis particularly. The fighting game love goes even further when you look at Sabin's moveset specifically though. His gimmick in Final Fantasy VI revolves around his Blitz command. Once you select it in the menu, you have to put in a specific input for him to execute the move, pretty much like a fighting game. Some of his blitzes are actually analogous to or straight up fighting game moves however. Most obvious is the Aura Cannon Blitz, done with the quarter circle forward motion on the Blitz entry screen. It's a big beam of light, but you put it in with a Hadouken input, so yeah, pretty on the nose. The more obvious reference comes from his starting blitz, Raging Fist, done by pressing forward, back, then forward during blitz entry. Sabin leaps at the opponent and pummels them with single-handed punches, all with the same arm. If the move animation, the input, or even the English name of the move itself wasn't a big clue for you, this is very much the Zanretsuken from Art of Fighting, with Raging Fist being one of the ways Zanretsuken can be translated specifically. I swear, 90s SNK was the MF Doom of video game devs. Your favorite video game developer's favorite video game developer, if you will. They're always at the scene of the crime. Speaking of RPGs, the Tales of series is another long-running franchise that I mentioned in the previous video, with Tales of the Abyss in particular giving Anis some of Heihachi's moves from Tekken if you knew her to look. However, that was only the second time a character in the series has shouted out Tekken. But unless you're deep in the Tales fan trenches, you probably don't know about this next one we're going to talk about. Tales of Destiny is the second main Tales game overall, but the very first one localized outside of Japan, releasing on the PS1 in 1998 in North America. It plays very similarly to its older brother Tales of Fantasia, featuring protagonist Stan fighting to uncover the mystery of the Swordians, a sentient group of weapons, one of which he finds himself being the wielder of. Of particular note is Stan's younger sister, Lilith, a supporting character in the original game that ended up being promoted to a playable party member in the game's PS2 remake. However, she's not playable in the original PS1 version, at least not by conventional means. Lilith was seemingly intended to be a recruitable party member at one point in the game's development, wielding her frying pan and giving her a martial arts-based fighting style with a few electricity-based moves for good measure. She can actually be glitched into the party via cheat devices, and she even has set levels she'll learn moves at. One such move is learned once you get her to level 39, and it's the Mishima style 10-hit combo from Tekken, complete with the lightning uppercut at the end. Again, you'd have to go pretty damn far out of your way to see this, but it's cool that it's technically still buried in the game data somewhere. Unfortunately, Lilith doesn't have this move in the remake, as she was given a completely different fighting style there. Here's a game I don't think I've ever had the chance to talk about before. Top Hunter Roddy and Cathy is a side-scrolling brawler for the Neo Geo. Its presentation makes it look like something of a precursor to Metal Slug, and there's good reason for that. A lot of the SNK staff behind this one were the same former IREM members that went on to put together Metal Slug. Top Hunter is a bit unique in how it plays, in that it's not a belt-scroller style beat-em-up, but it's not quite a single-plane beat-em-up like, say, Ninja Warriors either. The two title characters have the ability to jump between the foreground and background plane at will. This lets them avoid hazards on one plane, though they have to be careful that they don't get into a sticky situation on the plane they jump to. On top of that, both characters have the ability to stretch their limbs to grab items, throw enemies, and to navigate terrain, as well as allowing them to pick up dropped weapons from enemies. The big draw, however, is Roddy and Cathy's move list, which is kind of expansive for what it is, at least relative to the rest of the genre at that point in time. On top of their standard attack combos, there are special moves that both characters can do, each using fighting game inputs to initiate. And SNK, cheeky as they are, decided to make almost all of these special moves references to some of their then currently running fighting game series. Doing a fireball motion and pressing A with Roddy has him whip out Ryo's Kaoken from Art of Fighting. And Cathy, on the other hand, opts to do King's Venom Strike Fireball from the same series as well. If you rapidly press A with Roddy, he'll essentially do the Zenretsuken, marking its third appearance in this video alone. Doing so with Cathy has her do Robert Garcia's Gane Kyaku instead. Doing a Dragon Punch motion with Roddy and hitting attack also has him use Robert Garcia's Ryuga Uppercut. It's not just Art of Fighting that gets rep though. Holding down forward, then pressing right and A with Roddy has him perform Terry Bogart's Burn Knuckle. Doing the same input with Cathy instead has her perform Joe Higashi's Slash Kick. For both characters, if you hold up and then press up forward and A, they'll do Terry Bogart's Power Wave. Apparently, if you're at critical health with either character, collected 3 power-up items and hold down forward and then press forward in B, you'll do a desperation move that's essentially the Ryuko Ranbu, but I actually couldn't get the input to register for the life of me, so you'll just have to take my word for that one. Top Hunter is a really fun, if somewhat difficult game overall that I definitely recommend playing, and as far as I know, it's available on modern platforms via the Arcade Archives Neo Geo series. Pokemon is easily one of the biggest media franchises in the world. Whether you've moved on from the series or still rock with it to this day, there's no denying the impact that Pokemon has had on the globe at large. Pokemon is also a series that likes to wear its influences on its sleeve, whether it's shouting out older Game Freak works or discreetly nodding the things from other series like Dragon Quest, you can usually find a reference or two when playing the games. 2 such references come in the form of 2 moves in the series, both of which are fittingly fighting-type moves. The first might be a bit familiar to Generation 3 players that kept around the Blaziken, a Hitmonchan, or Breloom, Sky Uppercut. This is a fighting-type move with a base power of 85 and accuracy of 90, described as an uppercut thrown skywards. Sounds kinda familiar to the Shoryuken, right? Well, if you look at the Generation 3 animation specifically, the hit sparks even travel in the same vaguely J-shaped trajectories as Shoryuken. It gets better though. Sky Uppercut was notably one of a few moves that could hit Pokemon currently in the air after performing the first half of the moves Fly or Bounce, moves that otherwise leave the Pokemon largely invulnerable while they prepare the attack. This quite literally makes the move an anti-air uppercut. If that's not channeling the spirit of the Shoryuken, I don't know what is. The next move comes from the following generation in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, the fighting type move Aura Spear, which, yeah, it's basically the Hadouken. Even the name is similar in Japanese, being called the Hadodan over there. Before we move on, there's one last move I'd like to shout out, the Generation 2 iteration of Sonic Boom. Sonic Boom normally deals exactly 20 damage, making it a great early game move in the vein of Dragon Rage. In Generation 2 specifically though, this move had a different animation depending on the region. In North America and European territories, the move had an animation similar to the one for the flying type move Gust. In Japan and Korea though, this was the animation. And yeah, that's legit just Gaio Sonic Boom. In what's ironically the most forgettable game in this video, we have the 2013 action game Remember Me for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. Remember Me was the first project ever released by Don't Nod, the France-based studio that would go on to create the Life is Strange series. You play as Neeling, an amnesiac woman fighting to regain her lost memories, while also exposing a conspiracy behind memory-altering technology as a whole. It's okay. The combat is kind of rough, and you can tell this game was made in the post-Assassin's Creed world because of the plethora of chase and climbing sequences in the game. It does have a pretty great soundtrack and some neat visual design though, admittedly. The game was originally going to be titled Adrift, and was going to be published as a PS3 exclusive by Sony, but they backed out, only for Capcom, smack in the middle of their Western game development initiative, to swoop in and save things by publishing it for Don't Nod, giving the devs the chance to retool the game into what we know it as today. I mentioned combat before, and that's probably the most interesting part of the game. Your combo strings can actually be fully customized thanks to what the game calls press-ins. These are essentially combo modifiers that you can place anywhere on a combo string, and depending on where you put them, they'll serve as either a combo finisher, or grant you a bonus upon landing it, like HP regeneration. It's a neat system whose main problem stems from it not really opening up in a meaningful way until you're about to beat the game, which does kinda suck. If you pre-ordered the game on consoles or got the DLC as it was released later though, there are some extra presents that could be purchased as DLC. Some more modified versions of presents already in the game, but 3 of them are new unique moves. Taking advantage of their publishing deal with Capcom, 3 Street Fighter moves are available to use once purchasing the DLC. The first is the Shoryuken. The second is Guile's Flash Kick. And last but not least, you can also perform Chun-Li's iconic spinning bird kick. Since Capcom functionally owns the IP these days and the sequel is never happening, I honestly wouldn't be opposed to Nealon showing up in the future Capcom vs game or something. She has a solid moveset to work with at the very least. We briefly mentioned the Sonic series last video with the Hadouken Easter egg in Sonic Chaos, but there's 2 more examples in the series that are even more blatant regarding a certain other Street Fighter move we've talked about a bunch. Sonic Unleashed is, if nothing else, one of the more ambitious Sonic games of its time, being a globe-spanning adventure using an incredible lighting engine built specifically for it that's still iterated on to this day, and having an insanely large budget relative to pretty much every other game in the series. Seriously, even on original hardware, the 360 and PS3 versions of the game still look incredible to this day. Of course, though the daytime gameplay stages in Unleashed are the highlight, you also have the more contentious Hedgehog stages, framed as more of an action game diversion with some platforming mixed in as well. I actually don't outright hate these sections, but I do feel they run way too long for what they are and do effectively drag the game down more often than not. Hedgehog Sonic actually does have a moveset that gets progressively bigger the more you level him up, though he does have some moves by default. 2 such examples are a jumping uppercut Sonic can perform, aptly named the Shoryuken and the Clawken, both allowing Sonic to knock smaller enemies into the air and very obviously styled after and named after Street Fighter Shoryuken. It's not the only time the series has shouted out the Shoryuken though. Knuckles in Sonic Adventure 2 has a 3-hit punch combo that can be done with the 3rd punch ending with the jumping uppercut. He also has another spinning uppercut attack done by rotating the analog stick 360 degrees and then pressing the action button, the spiral upper. These aren't references, but they're important to establish context for the references we'll be talking about. Both of these moves would be reinterpreted in 2D in the Sonic Advance series developed by Dimps, a studio made up of ex-SNK and Capcom developers. In Sonic Advance 1, Knuckles retains his 3-hit punch combo from Adventure 2, but the final hit now has him do a leaping, flaming uppercut, just like the Shoryuken. In Advance 2, when launching off of a trick ramp, if you press up in the trick button, Knuckles will use Spiral Upper, now similarly animated like a Shoryuken. Even cooler, it's the only air trick in the game using the up input that can actually damage airborne enemies, making it analogous to an anti-air attack. Knuckles can use a grounded version of this move in Sonic Advance 3 as well, though it can only be done with Tails as his partner and it replaces the standard punch combo. Doubling back to Unleashed, the Hedgehog has one other move worth noting, the tricky Tornado Uppercut. You initiate this one by blocking, then pressing back in either triangle or Y. Sonic rushes forward before doing a spinning uppercut, hitting multiple times. This one's undoubtedly a nod to Ken Shinryuken. I'm starting to wonder if every video game dev secretly has a Ken main among them. This one likely isn't a reference, and probably a neat coincidence more than anything, but the Hedgehog's multi-hit dash and claw attack does bring to mind Wolverine's Berserker Barrage in the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Alright, quick little grab bag of examples before we close out the video. Anarchy Reigns Baron has a finishing move that's pretty much just Ken Shinryuken, flames and all. In Dead Rising, one of the moves Frank can learn via level up is the Somersault Kick, which is basically Guile's Flash Kick. This is a really good move for easily decapitating zombies as well. God Hand also has the Typhoon Kick, a spinning whirlwind kick not unlike the Tatsu was one of Gene's roulette moves. Gene also has access to the Laughing Dragon Punch, a move that can only be used to juggle airborne opponents and is obviously a send-up of the Shoryuken. Last but not least, the Worms games have a recurring ability called the Fire Punch, which is again, just a Shoryuken. They'll even occasionally shout Shoryuken as they do the move too. That's going to do it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to the patrons that support the channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.